Questions 9 through 16 ask us to match each description with all the terms that fit it. So I think that one way to think about this is when we have these terms up here, which ones are ruled out when we are given a description. So diagonals bisect each other. So a trapezoid, I can draw a trapezoid and those diagonals will not bisect each other. So we can rule out trapezoid on that one. And isosceles triangle, there are no diagonals with an isosceles triangle. A parallelogram, so if we have some parallel lines, they're always, oh, that was pretty far off. They're always going to result in bisecting the diagonals. So the parallelogram will definitely be one of those that do have diagonals that bisect. A rhombus, so all sides are congruent. If all sides are congruent, then we are also going to have diagonals bisecting each other. A kite, one of the diagonals is bisected, but the other one is not. So that one doesn't work. A rectangle, those are definitely going to have diagonals that bisect each other, and so is a square. So C, D, F, and G, let me write that in there a little better. I have to write pretty small. And 10, diagonals are congruent. Now that is only going to happen with a rectangle and a square. There's no other shape where that's going to happen, but with a rectangle and a square it does. So you can kind of see that if we do that, there's no way we're not going to end up with some congruent diagonals. So F and G. Diagonals are perpendicular. Now, that doesn't happen with a rectangle. It does happen with a square. With a kite, those diagonals will always be perpendicular. So we have a square and a kite, and let's see, a parallelogram. So if I, whoops, draw in those diagonals, those are not going to be perpendicular. A rhombus, so all sides congruent. Well, no, because you can have congruent sides, but oh, wait a second. That does look like all diagonals are perpendicular in a rhombus. Don't think there's any way you can draw it that it won't happen. And a parallelogram we already talked about. An isosceles triangle, no diagonals, and a trapezoid, no. Measures of interior angles sum to 360. Yeah, no matter what kind of quadrilateral you have, you can always cut it into two triangles. Each of those triangles will have interior angles that add to 180. So the interior angles of all quadrilaterals add to 360 degrees. So that's going to be H. Opposite sides are congruent. Well, it definitely happens with a square, definitely happens with a rectangle. A kite, no. Parallelogram, yes. A rhombus, yes, by definition. And there are no opposite sides in isosceles triangles, and a trapezoid, no. Opposite angles are congruent. Trapezoid, no. Parallelogram, yes. Rhombus, yes. Kite, no. Rectangle, yes. Square, yes. both diagonals bisect angles. So if we think about this, let's just look at a square. The diagonals will bisect the angles. And that is true. And in fact, they're all congruent in a square. So definitely G. Also rectangle. A kite, let's see. Will those diagonals bisect angles? I don't think they will here. So I could draw it really a funny kite like that. And so you can see that these angles will not be bisected. Let's see, a parallelogram. Will a parallelogram always have diagonals bisected? Let's see. It's good to draw unusual shapes to see. Nope, that's not going to be congruent. So doesn't work for a parallelogram. What about a rhombus? So all four sides congruent. I think that one is going to have some, always have diagonals that are bisected. And a trapezoid, no. Diagonals are perpendicular bisectors of each other. So definitely a square. Let's think about a rectangle. Will they be perpendicular bisectors? No. A kite? No. Well, let's see. They have to be perpendicular and bisectors. So only these ones are possible. So D, F, and G. And let's see, with a rhombus, are they perpendicular? Draw a little sketch. Yeah, they're going to be perpendicular and they're going to be bisectors. So D and G are going to have perpendicular bisectors. Sorry, this video was a little bit long. This stuff can be pretty difficult to figure out.